I thought I would working on a game with RP, and I built I see a lot of stuff about high scores, so I thought I would show you how I built my. This is a template that I originally built for our game, and it displays a list actually of high scores. Not really high scores. It's a log of the scores, and because our game is kind of two-player against the computer, and there's competing scores, and whoever has the most scores wins, like a basketball game or whatever. So when I originally started this, I wanted to have a way that the most recent score would always kind of show up on top. So I figured the best way to do this was a table. And so this is kind of the table that I came up with. It's just actors, because it's really about the code. This is just one of my coding prototypes. So let me show you what how it kind of works, and then we'll go through it a little bit. I don't know if this will end up being a multi-part series or what, but so basically I've just got some buttons in here, and this is going to allow me to manipulate the score, and then this is going to allow me to enter names, and these two actors here, this is like player one. This will be the name and the score, and the name and the score. And right now it's set up so that whichever player reaches 10 first, then the game ends, and then the score is recorded. The score will not be recorded if nobody wins. If you just back out and quit the game, it's not an official game, so it won't be copied. So we'll show you that, and kind of show you how it works, and I'll take you over to the scoring table and kind of show you how that's set up. So I'm going to just get a name. Just going to put a name. I'll put my name in for player one. And then we'll enter a name for player two. All right, so we can see our names are in there. And then we'll just mess with the score. Give us some numbers. We'll let John win this time. We'll let him get to 10 first. Come on. This game sounds kind of slow when I'm screen recording. One more. Okay, 10. We're going to go over to the table, and we'll see these are the scores, and so I'm not going to show anything in the other stuff, because as I show you how I built it, every time a new score is added, it's going to keep coming up in this top row, and then the other ones will just keep getting pushed down. And then what I really built was that, so I didn't have to have multiple screens. I wanted to be able to have up to I think I had up to like 28 scores that you could record before they start getting wiped out, and wanted them to be on one page. So basically I have a button that you can go up. And that's actually another page. It's got 4 pages, and when those are filled up, you can scroll through, and it'll just keep showing you the next set of stacks, and it all works with the same actors. It really kind of condenses everything down, so you don't have to have a bunch of different scenes loading all the time and stuff. You can just kind of do it that way. So let's just take a quick look at the code. If you want to kind of follow along, I'll just show you some of the stuff, and you can kind of follow along as I show you it. So you're going to need to make a table. So let's go ahead and look at our table. The basic table that I just called ScoreTable, and I've got 2 integers and 2 text fields. And I did it this way. You'll see the way I built the other stuff, because I want to go by rows up and down. I want these numbers. So I got 4 columns, and you got player 1 score, player 2 score, player 1 name, player 2 name. Okay, that's all you need. You don't need to make a whole bunch of columns. We're gonna create those as we go in Game Salad. So that's pretty much what our table looks like. And we'll go back to the scene, and you're going to need some attributes. So we'll look at what I've got, and I've got an integer. Now make sure when you're writing back and forth to a table, okay, that the attributes that you're going to take from, which my score, you need to make sure that the type that you make it in the table is the same type as it is in Game Salad's attribute setup. So we're going to be writing from an integer. Score 1, as you remember, just saw as an integer. So we're going to be writing from an integer to an integer in the column. Same thing with player 1 and player 2. We've got text fields, and we're writing from text fields in Game Salad, because what happens is my stuff goes into my attributes, and then from there it's transferred into the tables and saved. So we've got those, and I've got one called chart number. This is what keep track. You can call it page number. I call it charts. This is what keeps track of what page we're on when we're back at that, when you saw me scrolling through 4 pages. So we've got that attribute, and that's all we need for that. All right, so let's take a look at, I like to use managers in my project for code that's global. What it does is it really helps you to not bog down your other actors, and when you have code that's related to the whole scene, then you know where it is. If I had background sounds or I had background effects, depending on how much code I have in a particular manager, I'll make another manager that'll be the sound manager and scene manager and whatever. I just don't like to get too thick in my code in an actor. So, but I always use I always make managers and then put them on the scene, and then I know exactly when I'm looking for scene sounds. I know it's not buried in a background or whatever that I'm clicking through stuff and looking for. I know I can go right to the manager for that scene. Writing complex and really deep code and writing it well really comes from the discipline of naming all your stuff, really thinking out my code. Like this code here, most of it I wrote on a pad before I ever even wrote it in Game Salad. I lay out all my code. I'm really tight with my naming conventions to make sure everything kind of makes sense and I can interpret it when I'm looking at stuff, and I try to make it as descriptive and meaningful as possible. When I name and make attributes, I really try to make them meaningful, whether they're self attributes or game level attributes. I really try to make them meaningful so that they make sense to me and everything kind of fits together. I mean, this is logic, so when you start looking for problems, you really need to leave yourself a bread trail to find this kind of stuff. So let's just look at the basics here in the name manager of, what's going on here. And what you can see is what's happening here is in the table, you saw I only had one row. Okay? And this is because what I'm doing is I'm adding a row at the beginning every time we're going to go in and enter some new names. So when we hit this screen and we're gonna enter our player names, let's say somebody goes in and starts a new game, and they're gonna come to this screen because they need to add their player name and all that kind of stuff. You can arrange this stuff any way you want. But so what we're doing right now is when we're hitting this first screen, we're saying, hey, add a row to score.table. And we're adding the row. You can add or remove them at the beginning, at the end, at index. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a row so that every time you play, the last game you played is always the top one that you see when you go back to the table. So you can kind of see chronologically your patterns if you've been getting better, beating the computer or whatever. And then my player one, what I did for this one was that I said my attribute, player one name, this is my text attribute. When it contains none, don't do anything. And you saw when if we go back here, if you looked at my attributes, you can see that I actually put none in there. So the computer knows, it can look at it and say, okay, there's none in there, so don't do anything. But it says otherwise, when there's anything in there other than none, do this. So it's going to change the table value of score.table in row 1. Every time it's going to be row 1. So you don't have to, that's the nice thing about adding it onto the first row. Every time row 1 is going to be blank. So I'm writing it to row 1. Column 4 is the player 2, which is what I'm looking at right here, player 2 name. And it's going to write, the value is going to be that attribute. It's going to write game player name, which was the attribute that we looked at. Okay, so every time it's different than none, it's just automatically going to write it in there. This is a rule, so you could, enter any condition. You could make it right. Say when you hit the button to go play, you could tell it to write and save the table there. I just happen to be doing it here this way, just kind of a little trick. And of course, it's the same way with player 1. Okay. And then what we're doing is in my score log here, I have score 1 and player score 2 off those attributes that you saw. And what I got is when the condition's set to any instead of all. So when either one of these conditions become true, when whichever one reaches 10 first, when one of these reaches 10, it's going to write to the table in row 1, column 1, score 1, row 1, column 2, score 2. And that's it for the code in here. Then that just is my display text for the manager. And that's pretty much it. I mean, you don't really need to see the codes in these because these are just text. It says input text and whatever. It's kind of pointless. That's the main stuff that you wanted to see was, how everything's getting set up, and then this stuff is just, basic keyboard input. Keyboard input, put in player 1 game when it's pressed, basic stuff that you should already know. And this is just add the score, change game score to +1, pretty basic stuff. So we've got a couple minutes. Let's go ahead and look at the other scene real quick. Let me see if I think I'm saving my table in here. Yeah, let's look at this before we leave this scene. So what we're doing in here, this is what I was saying, this is my next button. So when touch is pressed, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save the table. So now that I've modified the table, have written the names in there, and the score is 0 right now. So usually in a game you'd break up, when the score gets entered and when the name gets entered, and that's fine because you can just save the names at this point, and then when the score comes out, you can just have the names put in that column in there. The row is already there, so you're just writing to row 1. You wouldn't be adding a row at that point. You would just be writing to row 1 in column 3 and 4. So I'm going to save my table. Always important when you enter data before you change the scene. Save the table, what you've written into it. Okay, and then what I'm doing here is I'm deleting the row, and you would probably do this when you're going to do the score, so you make sure the person finishes the game. But this is basically what I'm doing when I'm only want them to have 28 columns. So basically I have a self attribute here. It's an integer, and I'm monitoring my table. So this is my self attribute right here, table row count right here. It's an integer. And then what I have here in the expression editor is I have the table row count, and the table is gamescore.table. So this self number here is going to display how many rows are currently in my table. So right now that would be 2 because I had one already there and then I added one. So I have 2 rows. Now what I've got is now an attribute. I'm watching that attribute and then putting in a rule, and I'm saying when the table row count equals 29, remove the bottom row at the end. See where I've got here, remove row at end. So it's just going to chop off that last score. So it doesn't allow the table to get bigger than, since I'm adding at the top, I'm taking away at the bottom, and that what that does is it's not going to allow the table to get any bigger than 28 rows. All right, so that's kind of how I did that. And I'll start to show you a little bit on the next scene here. I'm probably going to have to do another one to kind of get into it a little more, but I'll just show you the basic prototype for right now it's probably what I have time for. So let's just look at our first chart. So this is the attribute that I showed you, that is the game chart number. That's a game level attribute, and it starts at 1. So when the game chart number equals 1, we're going to display, I'm displaying text from game score table. Now this self number and then row 3. Okay, because this is what we're looking at, is we're looking at the name of the first player, which was the third row, a text attribute. Now this self number here, which I'll get into later, we have 3 integers here, and what this is going to basically do is based on their order that I've got them in there, it's basically going to define which row you're looking at, and I'll explain that in the next video. So let's just look at these right here. So this basically I'm displaying it, okay, and these are all the same actor basically. You can see it's name 1, and then this one here is name 2. Okay, same thing, except it's going to be looking to same code, except it's going to be looking to column 4, which is name 2. Okay, but they're basically they're set up the same. And then we have our display score for that player, and it's the exact same kind of code setup, same philosophy. Once I show you how to make one of these, and then what to do in these sections here, you'll just be able to, you make one. This is the great thing about tables. You can just kind of make one, put all your code in there, and then go in and just simply modify these little side areas, these little self attributes, and you can change what that actor completely does by just making it look to a different place in a table. Really cool stuff. So this is going to show us our score, as we can see here. Save table cell value. It's going to tell us which row to look in, and that's where these come from. So these are going to be the row numbers, and then in which column. And player 1's score is in column 1. So it knows every time to look in that score, and then we'll have our up and down buttons. And then so what we'll do is in the next video we'll look at the up and down buttons, and then we'll look into how they affect the chart number, and then we can get into the system that I used with the self attributes to define what rows in the table that we're looking at. All right, so this is how to build a score system that always places your last score at the top, or there's a million ways you can modify this to make it work, but that's how I'm doing it. All right, thanks.